I'm sorry. Hey, I'm sorry. Sorry, you over there. Super sorry. Sorry. Yeah. I'm guessing you're wondering, why is he saying sorry instead of hello, thank you, you're far too kind? Well, the reason is what I'm about to talk about has everything to do with two topics, and those are specific events surrounding the murder of George Floyd and everyone's favorite topic, race. And I've found that when you're going to talk about these sort of things, the best thing to do is say sorry right off the bat, right at the top. So the whole thing has a little bit of a, this might sting a bit to it. So with that being said, let's get into it. Who am I? Well, my name is Matt Allen, Mr. Allen, if you're nasty. And I was born in Bronx, New York. Something that would give me a whole lot more street cred if it wasn't for the fact that I moved when I was very young to a town called Rosemont, Minnesota. Ooh. Fun fact about Rosemont. We had 3 liquor stores, a Mr. Movies, and a Blockbuster Video before we had a public library. So, just a little bit of Rosemont trivia to dazzle your friends with. Something that I learned right away growing up in Rosemont, Minnesota, I actually learned 2 things, cemented into the mold of who I was. The first was, I love to entertain. I love to sing, dance. You know what? I was called back junior year to be Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Now, I ultimately didn't get it, but I did get to sing a nice Jamaican number, so, that was fun. Which leads me to the second thing I learned. Because growing up in Rosemont, Minnesota, it was clear that I was unstoppably, uncontrollably, and irreversibly black. I'm sorry. For those of you who can't see color and are like, who is this weird muscle and bone man, and what's he talking about? My skin has a different shade than the majority of people I went to high school with, a majority of the people that I shared a Blockbuster Video with in Rosemont, Minnesota. And when you grow up different in a town like that, you have 3 options. You can either fight, flee, or hide. And while I was strong, I wasn't really a fighter, and I'm not in the fleeing business, so I decided to hide. Now, Matt, you ask, you're very wide. Where were you expecting to hide at? And to that I say, thanks for that. But there are multiple ways for children to hide from a world that hates and fears them. I wanted to be an entertainer, so I entertained. I danced, I sang, I threw myself into my passion, and it became my safe space. It's a lot harder to hear the hate when you have an auditorium full of people cheering for you. And don't get me wrong, I did enjoy it. I do enjoy it. For those of you who don't know, I do hip-hop in the Twin Cities under the name Nur-D. And I've done pretty well for myself. I've been able to play at First Ave, Paisley Park, the US Bank Stadium, and across the country in a dramatic amount of time. Something that many of my hip-hop peers have worked decades and decades just to get even half of the opportunities that I've been able to receive. Something that makes me just as well liked behind closed doors as it sounds. And some of the reasons for that is because, yes, my music is good, and yes, my music is positive, but a clear and repeating factor is that my music is clean. No cussing. Now, I have said damn a few times, and I did say that fictional haters could pucker to my anus, which, while gross, isn't technically swearing. I told the radio station who still wouldn't play the song. But it's true. 99% of my music is clean, no cussing. In fact, it's very nonviolent from content to tone. And it gives me a lot of opportunities. So when TEDxMinneapolis asked me to come here, stand on this spot, look super hot, which I feel like I have, I came up with an idea on what to speak on. Clean hip-hop is the future of hip-hop. And by embracing it, not only will you be a better artist and more successful, but you will affect the world more for the better. I had written stuff about that. But then something happened. May 25th, an officer of the Minneapolis Police Department murdered a man named George Floyd by kneeling on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, while 2 of his fellow officers held him down and 1 more made sure that the terrified onlookers couldn't save him. That video was captured on a cell phone, put online, and went viral worldwide. And when I saw that video, something inside of me broke. You see, no matter how much I danced or how wide I smiled, I was still black. And no matter how deep I threw myself into my passion, it was less of a fortress of solitude and more of a saloon door that trouble could and would walk through at any opportunity. My mind raced back to when I was leaving Rosemont Marcus Theater, and cops showed with their lights, and they demanded me to show them some ID. I remember pointing to my name tag because I was too afraid to reach for my wallet. My mind raced back to when my car got a flat in the blizzard, and a cop car pulled up, and I was so thankful that someone was there to help me. And as I stood up and brushed the snow from my pants, the officers got out of their cars with their hands on their guns and told me to drop the weapon. A literal saving grace that so many young men like me never got. As we marched the 3 miles from Cup Foods to the 3rd Precinct, I didn't want to dance or sing. I wanted them to hurt. As they fired gas and rubber bullets at children and elderly people all gathered, I didn't want anything. I thought to myself, I want each and every one of those cross-burning, goose-stepping, child-beating monsters to pay for what they did, and anyone who supports them to pay as well. I didn't want to dance. I didn't want to sing. May 27th, where we were providing first aid outside of a peaceful protest of the 3rd Precinct, I remember as a young black girl was brought to me shaking in her own blood, trying not to choke on her teeth because a police officer had shot her in the mouth with a non-lethal round. As we put her in a civilian car because 911 wasn't sending ambulances, I didn't want to make a 90s cartoon reference. May 29th, after being shot by the police and fleeing, I watched as a nurse tried to save a young girl's face and eye in a filthy basement by cell phone light, because a police officer had shot that young girl in the face at point-blank range for the crime of being outside after curfew. And I didn't want to sing a note. And on June 1st, when I was put on the ground, hands zip-tied behind my back, so tight that my hands went numb, I watched as an army of police officers descended upon a group of young people sitting at the Capitol singing their songs for a hope of justice. And I learned something there in my brokenness. That my hip-hop peers who have been shouting about these things were broken for a lot longer than I was. The truth is that while Rosemont, Minnesota wasn't a dream, many of my peers who had been ignored by the powers that be had been living in war zones for much longer than a week. And me coming here and asking them to be more accessible was akin to me asking them to lay down their swords and unwound themselves all at the same time. You see, the songs that escaped their lips had cuts and edges and jagged, and they would never expose their necks to anyone ever. I find myself here, burdened under the realization that while my talent and my drive undoubtedly contributed to my success, The truth is that one of the huge contributing factors to me being in the industry where I am today, being here in this room right now, is because I was safer. I am buckling under my arrogance, thinking that I could come here and ask these people, these veterans of systematic dehumanization, to change their songs instead of asking the world to change their ears. And I find myself shattered under the realization that, like Martin Luther King Jr., my message has only been so fervently accepted because those of Malcolm X and my hip-hop peers hit too deep and too radically for people to cope with. So what's my big ask? They say, when they give a speech, you're supposed to have a big ask, something you want the audience to do now that they've heard your story. And mine is this. I am asking you to not let the jagged pieces of a person's song keep you from hearing the melody of their heart. I am begging you to work on being emotionally stronger so that you can be publicly wrong about your misconceived and preconceived notions of people and places and movements that don't center around what makes you more comfortable. Don't let your sacred spaces of success be only filled with people who make you feel good, but allow those spaces to be filled with people who make you feel challenged for not being good enough. And when I said I was sorry earlier, I lied. Woo!